Jane. She's like, how do you remember these dates, But it's a 1955 Jeep with a front and rear plow. And out of his heart, he would go up and down the sidewalks at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning and plow the snow in front of these businesses. He didn't want any money. He wasn't even really looking for a thank you. He wanted to do something great for the community and to kind of open up the community, because when you had 12 feet of snow a year, it was a lot of work. So he's just awesome. So then, what can we say? So he's just awesome. I mean, if we could all just give for the future in memory of our dad, if you could just do something for the community, do something for your neighbor, he's saying thank you. He's just so awesome. So my owner's here. Thank you so much for my owner to come. My owner's dad was a dear friend of my dad. So that's what got me to work in Portland. My dad had so much respect for my owner's dad, Jim Weston, that I decided to go work there, and I went up there for training, and that was 32 years ago. So I'm still in training. I guess I'm a slow learner. But they haven't kicked me out yet. So anyway, I'd like to leave you with this. Jay's is going to crack up on this one. This came from some training from the dealership. It was a ride and drive for all the salespeople to learn about this new product. Okay, so I changed 3 words in this. I took a picture of this, and I'm thinking I wasn't going to use it, but then for anything. But I took a picture of it. Then I looked at it again. I'm thinking, wow, this is really cool. So here's how it goes. No one ever said, give just a bit. No one ever said, give it less. The world was not built by half measures or by half-hearted. Our dad used to say, give it everything. Go all in as you go all out. When you give it all. When you do it right. And when you build, you create. It's how we started, and it's how we live to this day. In the hearts of our people, in the eyes of our family. We create memories for life in all of its glory, in all of its wonder, because that is everything. And nothing short of everything will do. Whether you're building a community, that's where it said car, whether you're building a community or building a life, give it everything. Thank you, Ross and Roe. Thank you so much.
Good morning. I'm Jim Rowe. I'm Ross's second oldest son. I live in Michigan. I guess that makes me the black sheep of the family, but I love Oregon. First of all, I just want to thank all of you for coming today. Now, Ross would be saying with his impish grin, oh, gee whiz, you shouldn't all come. But believe me, he would be glad you're here. Believe me, it would be a big deal to him. So, to Ross's wife, Annette, married for 63 years, thank you for providing a great support system for Dad. You allowed him to flourish and achieve his dreams. But my dad was not always a day at the beach, believe me, to be around. He was completely unconventional, had no sense of time or schedules, would get irritated if you asked him to be on time. He was nonstop energy, sometimes eccentric, rarely had a filter, and he loved to discuss controversial subjects. but you supported him, and you also really challenged him to be the best version of himself. Thanks, Mom. To my sisters and my sister and my brother, thanks for your support during this process. We all experienced Dad's loss in different ways, but we continue to support each other, and I really appreciate that. And to Christy, Steve's wife, she was with my dad round the clock in his last weeks, which is unbelievable. More than you could ever expect from a daughter-in-law, but she was there, and thank you so much, Christy. David Brooks, the writer and columnist, wrote about the difference between there's the resume virtues and there's eulogy virtues. And resume virtues are those things that the outside world values: achievement, education, success, you name it. And then eulogy virtues, of course, are those little things that you would hope someone would say about you at your funeral. What kind of person are you? My dad was certainly a driven man, and he felt like he had much to achieve. Many of you are probably familiar with a lot of his resume virtues. Born on a small family farm in South Dakota, worked nonstop, was valedictorian of his high school, got a scholarship at the University of South Dakota, got selected to one of the most selective universities in the country, Northwestern, just north of Chicago, served in the Army and achieved the rank of second lieutenant, worked for Buick Motor Division, worked retail for a number of years, then went to Sault Ste. Marie and was able to get a dealership up there on a shoestring, and of course relocated to Grants Pass in the early 80s and established Row Motors. His community service was really important to him, and he had the drive, the skills, and the personality to make it happen. As you know, he started the Niobe Zoo in the Quad Cities. He helped start the Sault Ste. Marie International 500 snowmobile race in the late 60s, and back then, believe me, no one was even sure a snowmobile would go 500 miles. And of course, his beloved tree plant here in Grants Pass. What I would like to focus on, though, is some of the smaller moments, some of those that I observed as a son, the stories I heard, and it will provide maybe just a unique perspective on who he was. To say my dad was raised in a Stoic home would be an understatement. For the most part of it, it was the Norwegian way. They settled in the Dakotas. It was a very unforgiving place. Blizzards in the wintertime, the Dust Bowl, they would put prairie fires out with burlap sacks. But they lived through it. They were a hardy bunch. And while my grandparents didn't have much education, they really encouraged their kids to get a better life. And they knew that probably none of them would stay on the farm, but it was more important for them to achieve their dreams, and they encouraged that. One of the stories my dad would tell about his dad, he would, after long days of work, he put on his clean pair of overalls, and he would go into town and participate in the Lincoln County Debating Society. And this had a big impact on my dad, because those of you who have been in debating knowing that you don't always get to choose the side that you have to support. So it forces you to look at all different sides of the issue. And this really stuck with my dad. You couldn't pigeonhole him as a Democrat, Republican issues. He would come at every different angle because it was the way he thought from learning from his dad. And it was really important to understand that. He'd want to understand how someone thought. So my dad certainly carried with him a lot of that stoic Norwegian approach. Caring for him was not patting somebody on the back saying, hey, great job, or being warm and fuzzy. Caring to him was about actions. I remember we were in the Sioux at his first dealership, and we had a young 20-something kid, and he, like a lot of 20-somethings, he really had no direction. And my dad would go back and, you got to get this together, man. You got this ability, and sometimes he appreciated it, and sometimes not so much, right? But I remember this kid standing up at a dealership Christmas party. And he said, in his own simple, eloquent way, he said, I've never met a man that cared so much. But to him, caring is about actions. It wasn't about making you feel good. It's about actions. Insatiable curiosity was another hallmark of my dad. It was such an excellent quality to have, because if you're curious and you want to learn, you'll never be bored. You'll always be interested in other people. So when I was about 12 years old, he invited me to go down to the auction in, I think it was about 4.5 hours away in Lower Michigan. So we're riding along, and it gets about lunchtime, and he says, hey, Jim, why don't we get some lunch? I said, okay. He said, we're going to stop at a truck stop. I said, okay. You know why, right? They serve large quantities of food, less chance of getting sick. Right? So, okay. Didn't matter if it was good or not. It was just large quantities of food, right? So we walk in, and there's this lunch counter there, and he says, I'll tell you what, Jim, you sit over there, I'll sit over here, we'll get back in the car, we'll trade stories. So I was like 12, and I'd say, oh, okay, normal, right? It's, so, of course, but I knew I had to figure out how to strike up a conversation with this guy, get some information, because I had to report out to my dad when we got in the car, But to him, it's like, well, why would you spend time with my son? We can learn from someone else. I'm riding the car with you all day. Like, so what, but that's, so needless to say, it really helped me learn to get into uncomfortable situations, because you know that you just start asking people questions and you're generally fine, right? So another time much later in life, when I came to visit one time, we were at lunch, and of course, my dad, surprisingly, he found someone to talk to. Right. So often it's a typical thing. We just said, fine, we're going to the car. It's like, and here he comes out finally, beaming, and he says, you know what? He said, I've met the most interesting guy. Really? Oh, okay, yeah. He said, you know what he does for a living? I said, no. He goes, he hauls manure. Isn't that interesting? He was fascinated, interested in everybody. It didn't matter what your station was like. And probably the more obscure or eccentric type occupation, he thought was even more interesting. So a lot of my theme of my dad's life was hard work and being productive. He never really had an interest in a sunny beach vacation. It was always about building something, maintaining it, or making it better. My relationship with my dad, like Brad mentioned, was often built around work. In the Sioux, it would start snowing around Halloween, and the snow didn't go till May. And we had this old downtown location, and he had this John Deere front end loader, and he would go out, he would put on his snowmobile suit over his suit and go out, I think, as an escape sometimes from the day-to-day business pressures. But again, we were driving dump trucks back and forth, and it was connecting through work was how we connected with our dad. So you'd think that someone like my dad was supremely confident in his abilities for what he achieved. But not so much. He really wasn't. It's really also what drove him to work so hard. I remember one time he was telling about when he decided to become a car dealer in the Sioux. Didn't have much money. He was highly leveraged, on a shoestring. And he said, you know, Jim, he said, I know I'm not the smartest guy, but no one's going to outwork me. And it's true. He knew that's the one edge he would have in life, that nobody could outwork him. And also, I think it kept him humble. He would often say, I've had a lot of lucky breaks. He said, I had a lot of great support from people. He never thought that he knew it all. So one last story about his love of hard work and being productive. I came to visit, I think, last September. And he'd had his cancer. He was getting a lot of side effects from the treatment. If you ever saw my dad's back, it looked like he'd been in 10 train wrecks. I mean, he was really kind of in bad shape. But I get here, and he goes, hey, Jim, you think we could go to work on that trail down at the coast? I said, sure, Dad. If that's what you want, So we get there, and, he's hobbling down this trail, we get there, and we're trying to get this big 50-pound rock out of the sand, and he says, and of course, I'm continuing to get lessons. Look at the tools we're using, the incline plane, the wedge. Isn't this interesting? Okay, Dad. And he says, now, Jim, he says, you work in an office, he said, you're not used to this kind of work. You better be careful. I said, oh, okay, Dad. Yeah, right. So in closing, I would just, I remember a rare moment with my dad when his dad died, I think in 1972. And he said, Jim, he said, no matter how far along you are in life, when you bury your dad, you still feel alone, he said. And so I understand that feeling too. But I'm thankful for the 91 years of life and the huge legacy that it leaves. Thank you again for all being here. It means a lot to me, and it means a ton to my dad. Thank you.
I thought it appropriate I brought Molly with me. The therapy dog, they also say, is usually for somebody else. Today it's for me. But actually, Molly was with Dad in his last days of life in the hospital, and he got some great pictures of Molly. So my name is Steve, the oldest, and the problem is I've been heard many of the same stories because his life did revolve around work with Dad. But so I was busy lining out things as Jim and Brad were talking. So I'm done. Okay. Actually, that's not true. On behalf of the Rowe family, I would like to thank everyone for coming. It is impossible to recognize Dad's many accomplishments in this eulogy. You're going to hear about a man that was driven to excel and to contribute, to love and be loved, to be compassionate to others. And like all of us, he had flaws and shortcomings. In early December, Dad was at Three Rivers Medical Center, and it was his first time in his 90 years of life that he'd spent a night in the hospital. He was actually born in the family farm. And I was staying with him overnight in the hospital. And during the night, I mentioned to him that Harry Mack would be receiving an Outstanding Rotary Achievement Award at Grove Gateway Rotary, where I'm a member. And Dad had received a similar award last year from our Rotary Club. And he asked if he could attend the meeting with me. And I said I would love to have him attend if he was physically able. And when Harry's award presentation came in late January, Dad was using a walker. His voice was weak, but he was there. I forgot to tell him that I was going to be the MC for the award celebration. And afterward, on the ride home, because he wasn't driving at that time, he told me how proud he was of me for doing this. And about a month ago, he asked me when my next speech was going to be. And I told him I had no speeches planned. Sadly, this is my next speech for Dad. And I feel his presence today, and I hope all of you do as well. I thought I would title my eulogy, The Dash. And it represents the dash between 1928 and 2019, those years of life. And there's so much to talk about in this remarkable man. He was born on the family farm in Canton, South Dakota on March 1st, 1928. He was the youngest of 5 children. His oldest sister, Mavis, is the only surviving sibling at 102 and still lives in Canton. Growing up on the family farm had a major impact on Dad's life as he left for college. For example, in 1954, South Dakota became the last state in the United States to require a driver's license, and Dad laughed that he did not need a driver's license until 1954. He participated in Boy Scouts, 4-H, FFA, and he worked hard on the family farm. His knowledge of using farm equipment was useful his entire life, as you heard Jim and Brad talk about. He participated in many school activities during school years. His parents, Arthur and Palma, believed in education and made sure that their children had the opportunity for college, even goes so far as to pay for Dad's Northwestern University tuition, in part with a side of beef from the family farm. Dad had a wide range of interests in public school, including theater, football, photography, music, and academics. While there were only 2 students in his first grade class, Dad graduated as the class valedictorian in 1946 with 25 students. Dad considered many different career choices and did not know exactly what his career would be. He had many interests in life, as we heard about. He solo piloted a Piper airplane. He went 1 year to the University of South Dakota and then transferred to Northwestern in Evanston, Illinois. He thought about the law profession, and he pursued a speech degree at Northwestern. That's a surprise to all of us, isn't it? Dad had a great time in college and participated in the fraternity. He sold pots and pans door to door to help pay his bills. After graduating from Northwestern, he decided to go in the automotive business and enrolled at General Motors Institute in Flint, Michigan. He graduated from GMI and enlisted in the United States Army. He served in the 82nd Airborne Division Tank Battalion as a second lieutenant, and one of his military highlights was participating in the inauguration of President Eisenhower in 1953 with a parade of tanks. He rode in the caboose on the train from Fort Bragg to Washington, D.C. After participating in the inauguration parade, Dad enjoyed going to the various inauguration balls. As we all know, Dad had a way of talking his way into anything, even without a ticket. One of the stories Dad shared about the military was one of his fellow African-American soldiers. They boarded a bus together in the South. As they got on the bus driver said to his African-American friend, "Back of the bus." And Dad went with his friend to the back of the bus, and they sat in the colored section of the bus. His friend was embarrassed and amazed that Dad would sit with him. I know Dad would have it no other way. The Korean War ended, and Dad returned to work for Buick Motor Division in Flint, Michigan. And while working, Dad captured the attention of the Buick General Service Manager, E.J. Krause, and he introduced Dad to his daughter, Annette Krause, and they were married on December 10th, 1955. Dad transferred to Moline, Illinois, and later left Buick to work for Harrelson Motors in Moline, Illinois. By the way, Dad, I got a Buick tie on just for you. All four of us, the children, were born there, and Dad was active in the local Optimist Club and brought 2 Wildcats in the showroom to showcase the new Buick Wildcat. This experience the idea of community zoo, and he helped start the Niabi Zoo in Moline, Illinois. In 1967, Dad bought the Chevrolet dealership, as Jim talked about, in Sault Ste. Marie. Founded in 1668, Sault Ste. Marie is the 3rd oldest existing city in the United States. It receives about 175 inches of snow per year. And Dad put his farm equipment to use on the John Deere tractor and the 55 Jeep that we heard about today. And it was a 2-seat Jeep. And it was fun for the 4 kids to take turns riding with Dad in the Jeep. And there were some great family discussions between the two, whoever was riding there. We had the only yard in Sault Ste. Marie with a snowmobile racetrack. Dad would use the tractor to make bank turns in our yard. And we had a 1964 Scorpion snowmobile that we would take turns with the friends in the neighborhood in the snowmobile racetrack. In 1968, Dad met with local merchants in the drugstore across the street from Coffee. There was a Chevrolet Camaro Indy pace car in the dealership showroom. They discussed this 500-mile snowmobile race, and the I-500 was born. We actually sold snowmobiles in the family dealership, Scorpion and Polaris. Dad worked countless hours with other volunteers building the 1-mile banked oval track. And the race was held in '69, and it continues annually to this day. You heard about our Sears Craftsman-style house built in the early 1900s. Brad talked about Thanksgiving. And also, one thing I remember is on Sunday afternoons after church, we'd have family board meetings. And we talked about what was happening in our lives, family vacations and other things, and the quarter was always brought up there as well. And we knew that Dad was chairman of the board, and he encouraged open discussion. All 4 children worked in the family dealership, and we had our paper routes. Dad always held each of us to a higher standard than the other employees. While it seemed unfair at the time, it made us better. Mom did a great job at home with the 4 children, and also with her many friends and community activities. Our parents believed in the value of education for each of us. They wanted each of us to have a college education if we wanted it. I never did well in high school academically. I was active in scouting and worked at the dealership. I never told my parents about my school bullying experience, and that led to my poor high school grades. I wish now that I would have leveled with them about that at the time. My parents felt that I could do better than what my grades showed in high school. We learned that I could take some college accounting and English classes, and this success helped me grow and allowed me to get into college where I found success. In 1982, our family discussed the possibility of moving. We were interested in the West Coast. Kind of got the snow. We sold the Sioux dealership, and Dad and I traveled for 9 months looking for a new dealership. While it was frustrating at the time not knowing our future, it was educational traveling with Dad throughout the western United States. Bartle McKee and Grants Pass was for sale, and our family moved here. It is amazing to think that Mom and Dad started over in a new community with a new business, and Dad was already 55 years old. Dad immediately became active in community activities and served in many local organizations. Mom has been active in community activities as well. And in 1990, Dad started the Josephine County Tree Plant for local youth to learn the importance of planting trees. We learned this week that it has been now named the Ross Stroh Memorial Tree Plant. What a fitting honor, and thank you to the many dedicated volunteers that will continue Dad's tradition. I promise to do all that I can do to make this annual tree plant a continued success. Dad could talk to anybody about anything. He was never really a reader except for the newspaper. He learned by talking to people. I remember on a trip to Israel with Dad were in the Palestinian territory talking to a shopkeeper. And Dad was asking very pointed questions about the Israeli views. And I could see the anger in the shopkeeper's voice because I could see the neck kind of bulging out there. And I realized that Dad was really interested in hearing his thoughts. And at the beginning of the conversation, I thought we were going to have an international incident. And at the end of the conversation, we parted friends. This also showed another side of Dad about being late. Because many times on the trip, we would see the taillights of the coach driving her up, and we'd be running to catch this coach. The thing is, Dad always enjoyed visiting with others. We often joked that Dad would be late for his own funeral. Glad to see he's here. It wasn't so much that Dad enjoyed being late, but rather he wanted to continue a conversation with another person. Many of us here know today these conversations, how Dad put his Northwestern speech skills to good use, because he can talk a long time. He was always curious and interested in learning more. He was a very compassionate person. He wanted to hear how we could help others in need, such as serving on the homeless task force. The amazing thing about all of Dad's projects is they stand the test of time. Dad was great at having a vision, involving others in his plans, and he was not afraid to get his hands dirty on projects. He was a tireless worker in all that he did. He wanted people to do their best, whatever their lot in life. He was active in many community improvement programs, projects. You will notice the funeral contains a great deal of music, and this was by design. In his last days, Dad talked about what he wanted at his funeral. Dad loved music all of his life, whether he was singing in the Bethany Presbyterian Church Choir or attending the Rogue Valley Symphony. One of the long-term health issues that Dad caused the most difficulty was restless leg syndrome. He suffered with it for 40 years, and it caused him many sleepless nights. He said it felt like somebody was sticking needles in his legs. He could not get comfortable day or night. This is a major reason you would see him talking